Picture the biggest submarine that's ever been built. We're talking 184 meters of pure underwater intimidation. The Belgorod started life as something else entirely, but Russia took an unfinished Oscar II hull and basically said, let's make this thing into something the world has never seen before. What they created is what defense analysts call a special missions platform, which is a polite way of saying it does things other submarines can't even dream of. Here's where it gets wild. This thing carries Poseidon torpedoes, but calling them torpedoes doesn't really capture what they are. These are nuclear-powered weapons with their own nuclear warheads, estimated at 2 to 3 megatons each. They can travel thousands of miles completely on their own, underwater, and when they detonate, they're designed to create radioactive tsunamis. The whole concept is straight out of a disaster movie, except it's real and it's operational. The Belgorod doesn't stop there. It carries mini submersibles that can crawl along the ocean floor and mess with things like undersea cables. Think about how much of the internet runs through cables on the seafloor. Now think about a submarine that can send out little robots to cut or tap into those cables. That's not just military power, that's the ability to cripple global communications without firing a single shot. What makes tracking this thing so difficult is where it operates. The Belgorod loves hanging out under Arctic ice in deep water. It can stay submerged for months at a time, just lurking in places where regular anti-submarine warfare patrols don't usually go. When it leaves port, Russia goes into communications blackout mode. Nobody knows where it is or what it's doing. Defense analysts lose sleep over this submarine because it represents a completely different kind of threat. It's not about winning a traditional naval battle. It's about having the capability to cause catastrophic damage to coastal cities or critical infrastructure while staying completely hidden in the deep ocean. The fact that something this large can just disappear into the depths tells you everything about how serious modern submarine warfare has become. Western naval intelligence officers call the Yasen-M class NATO's worst nightmare, and they're not exaggerating. This is Russia's latest nuclear attack submarine, and some assessments claim it's actually quieter than the American Virginia class. That's debatable, but the fact that it's even in the conversation tells you how serious this design is. Russia built this submarine from the ground up using modern technology instead of just updating old Soviet designs. The Yasen-M is designed to do everything. It hunts submarines, it attacks surface ships, it launches cruise missiles at land targets. The vertical launch system can fire caliber cruise missiles with ranges over 1,000 kilometers, but the real attention getter is the Zircon hypersonic missile. This thing travels at Mach 8 or faster, which makes it almost impossible to intercept with current defense systems. A submarine launching hypersonic missiles at carrier strike groups is the kind of threat that fundamentally changes naval tactics. These submarines use advanced spherical sonar arrays for detecting threats and targets at extreme ranges. The hull is covered in acoustic tiles, and the propulsion system uses pump jet technology to reduce noise. The crew size is only around 64, which is remarkably small for a submarine this capable. Russian designers achieved this through heavy automation, which also reduces the number of people who might make noise discipline mistakes. The mission profile for these submarines is going after high-value NATO targets. We're talking about aircraft carriers, command ships, and critical sea lanes. A single Yasen-M could theoretically threaten an entire carrier strike group if it got into position undetected. That makes every one of these submarines a strategic asset that Western navies have to track and potentially neutralize in any conflict scenario. Production numbers are limited so far, which means each hull represents a significant capability that Russia can't easily replace, but the boats that do exist are considered extremely dangerous. NATO anti-submarine warfare forces train specifically for encountering Yasen-class submarines because they represent the top tier of Russian underwater capability. The Virginia-class Block 5 is what happens when you take an already excellent attack submarine and decide to turn it into a cruise missile delivery truck. The defining feature is the Virginia payload module, which is basically an 83-foot section they added to the middle of the hull. This module contains 4 large tubes, and each tube can hold 7 Tomahawk missiles. Add in the regular vertical launch tubes up front, and you're looking at around 65 Tomahawks on a single submarine. Why does this matter? Because the older Ohio-class SSGNs are retiring, and the Navy needed a way to maintain the ability to launch massive conventional strikes from submarines. The Block 5 fills that gap while still being able to do everything a regular attack submarine does. These boats hunt other submarines. They can take out surface ships, they gather intelligence, they can put Navy SEAL teams ashore. They're true multi-mission platforms. The technology packed into these submarines is absolutely cutting edge. Instead of traditional periscopes, they use photonic masts with cameras and sensors. The sonar systems can detect contacts at extreme ranges. The design is modular, which means they can swap out systems and upgrade technology throughout the boat's lifetime without major overhauls. These submarines are expected to serve into the 2070s, which tells you how future-proof the design is. One of the coolest capabilities is launching unmanned underwater vehicles. These little drones can scout ahead, check for mines, map the seafloor, all while the submarine stays hidden at a safe distance. It's like having eyes and ears that can go places too dangerous or shallow for the submarine itself. The Block 5 can also carry dry deck shelters for special operations, turning it into a covert insertion platform for teams that need to get into hostile territory without being detected. What really sets the Virginia class apart is how quiet it is. These are among the most silent submarines ever built, which is remarkable considering how much capability they pack into the hull. When you combine stealth with that kind of firepower and versatility, you get a submarine that can influence events far beyond the immediate naval battle. It's a strategic asset that can strike targets over 1,000 miles inland while remaining completely undetected beneath the waves. The Seawolf class is the submarine equivalent of a supercar that only 3 people can afford. The Navy originally wanted 29 of these boats, but they only built 3 because each one cost over $3 billion. The Cold War ended, the Soviet threat diminished, and suddenly, spending that much money per submarine seemed excessive. But those 3 boats that did get built are still among the most capable submarines on the planet. These submarines were designed for one specific mission: hunt Soviet submarines under Arctic ice in deep water. Everything about the design is optimized for speed, depth, and stealth simultaneously, which is incredibly difficult to achieve. Most submarines are quiet at low speeds, but get noisy when they speed up. The Seawolf can run fast and stay quiet, which gives it enormous tactical advantages in combat situations. The torpedo room on these boats is massive. They can carry 50 torpedoes and missiles in various combinations. That's an enormous amount of firepower for an attack submarine. The hull is built to handle operations at depths that would crush most other submarines. This allows Seawolves to go places and do things that other boats simply can't attempt. The third boat, USS Jimmy Carter, got a special modification. They added a 100-foot section to the hull that contains equipment for special operations and intelligence missions. This submarine can tap undersea cables, deploy, and recover equipment from the seafloor, and conduct operations that remain classified even decades after they occur. The Carter is essentially a spy submarine with capabilities the Navy doesn't talk about publicly. Despite being older designs now, the Seawolf class boats remain at the top of the capability pyramid. They're faster than Virginia class submarines, they can dive deeper, and their acoustic signature at high speed is still better than most modern designs. The Navy uses them for the most sensitive and demanding missions because they know these submarines can handle situations that might overwhelm other boats. The British went all in when they designed the Astute class. These are the biggest attack submarines the Royal Navy has ever operated, and they're built for one thing: staying submerged for as long as humanly possible while remaining completely undetectable. The nuclear reactor never needs refueling for the entire operational life of the submarine. That's 25 years or more of service with the same fuel load. The only reason these boats ever have to come back to port is because the crew runs out of food. The sonar system on these submarines is legendary. The Sonar 2076 is often called the most capable underwater detection system in the world. It uses bow arrays, flank arrays, and towed arrays to paint a picture of everything happening in the water around the submarine. We're talking about detection ranges of hundreds of miles in the right conditions. That means an Astute can hear other submarines and ships long before they have any idea it's there. Each Astute can carry up to 38 weapons through 6 torpedo tubes. That includes spearfish torpedoes for taking out submarines and ships, but also Tomahawk cruise missiles for striking targets on land. The Tomahawk gives these submarines a strike range of over 1,000 miles, which turns an attack submarine into a strategic weapon that can influence conflicts far inland. A single Astute lurking off a coast represents a constant threat that's almost impossible to locate and neutralize. The hull is covered in acoustic tiles that absorb sound instead of reflecting it back. The machinery inside is mounted on special systems that prevent vibrations from traveling through the hull and into the water. Everything about the design is optimized for silence. British submariners are trained to be absolutely paranoid about noise. They're some of the best in the world at quiet operations, and combined with the Astute's design, you get a submarine that NATO relies on for tracking Russian submarines in the North Atlantic. The Common Combat System ties everything together. It's the digital brain that takes input from all the sensors, manages the weapons, and helps the crew make decisions faster than the opposition. These submarines represent the peak of conventional attack submarine design, and they're considered the best non-American boats in NATO service. Russia knew their old Soviet-era boomers were getting noisy and outdated, so they built the Borei-A class from scratch. This is their answer to Western submarine technology, and it's a pretty serious piece of engineering. Each one carries 16 Bulava missiles that use multiple independently targetable warheads. That means one missile launch can hit 6 to 10 different targets, which makes defending against them basically impossible. The big deal with the 955A variant is how much quieter it runs compared to older Russian submarines. They finally adopted pump jet propulsion, which was a first for Russian ballistic missile submarines. The whole hull got redesigned with better hydrodynamics. Russia closed the noise gap with NATO submarines significantly, which makes Western navies really nervous because a quiet boomer is exponentially harder to track and potentially neutralize. These boats are built to operate in what Russia calls bastion zones, mainly the Barents Sea and the Sea of Okhotsk. These are areas where Russian air defense and surface ships can provide protection, while the submarines go about their business of maintaining a nuclear deterrent. The Arctic is their playground. These submarines are designed to punch through thick ice and operate in conditions that would be extremely challenging for submarines built for warmer waters. The crew size is around 107, but the automation level is way higher than previous generations. Russian submarine designers learned from building older boats that required huge crews and constant maintenance. The Borei-A is more efficient, which means the crew can focus on the mission instead of just keeping the boat running. These submarines represent the future of Russia's sea-based nuclear forces. As the old Delta-class boats retire, the Borei-A takes over the job of making sure Russia maintains a credible second strike capability. That's the strategic deterrence game in a nutshell. The Ohio class has been the backbone of American nuclear deterrence since the 1980s, and there's a reason it's still around. These submarines carry up to 24 Trident 2D5 missiles, and each one of those missiles can carry multiple warheads that can hit different targets. Do the math on that firepower, and you'll understand why just one Ohio-class submarine represents more destructive capability than most countries' entire militaries. What makes these boats truly dangerous is that you'll never see them. The Navy has spent decades perfecting the art of making these submarines disappear into the ocean. They use pump jet propulsion instead of traditional propellers, which makes them incredibly quiet. The hull is covered in special tiles that absorb sound. Everything inside is mounted on noise dampening systems. When an Ohio-class submarine is running silent, it's essentially a ghost carrying enough firepower to end civilization. These submarines can stay underwater for over 3 months straight. The only thing that brings them back to port is running out of food. The nuclear reactor provides power and makes oxygen from seawater, so the crew could theoretically stay down there indefinitely if you kept restocking the kitchen. Patrols typically run 70 to 100 days, and during that entire time, nobody knows exactly where they are. That's the whole point. 4 of the original Ohio-class boats got converted into something different. Instead of ballistic missiles, they carry 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles each. These SSGNs became platforms for conventional strikes and special operations support. The remaining boats stick to their original job of strategic nuclear deterrence, which is basically making sure that if anyone launches a nuclear attack on the United States, there will absolutely be a devastating response from somewhere in the ocean. The reliability rate on these systems is over 95%, which is insane for something this complex. The Trident II D5 missile is accurate enough to be used against hardened military targets, not just cities. There's a life extension program keeping these missiles viable into the 2040s, which gives you an idea of how good the original design was. The Ohio class represents the ultimate insurance policy, and the Navy makes sure at least a few of them are always out there, somewhere, ready to respond. France takes its nuclear independence seriously, and the Triumphant class is how they maintain it. Only 4 of these submarines exist, but that's all France needs to ensure constant at-sea deterrence. 1 is always on patrol, 1 is in port for maintenance, 1 is in training or workup, and 1 is in reserve. This rotation has worked for decades. These submarines fire the M51 ballistic missile, which is a beast. The thing weighs over 50 tons and carries multiple warheads with a range estimated around 8,000 kilometers. That gives France intercontinental reach from submarines that can patrol anywhere in the Atlantic. The M51 represents a significant upgrade from the older M45 missiles, and the entire fleet is being converted to carry the newer weapon. What's impressive about the Triumphant class is how quiet they are. French engineers have gotten really good at acoustic isolation and hull design. These submarines are regularly compared favorably to American and British designs in terms of stealth. They're coated in anechoic tiles, the machinery is isolated from the hull, and the design incorporates decades of lessons learned from operating nuclear submarines. The strategic data system aboard these boats is integrated into France's centralized nuclear command structure. France doesn't mess around with delegation when it comes to nuclear weapons. The decision to launch comes from the top, and the submarine commanders have the systems and procedures to execute that order if it ever comes. The entire setup is designed to ensure that France maintains an independent nuclear deterrent that doesn't rely on NATO or anyone else. French SSBN patrols are state secrets. Nobody knows where they go or what routes they take. The departure and return schedules are classified. This level of operational security ensures that potential adversaries can't predict where a Triumphant class submarine might be at any given time. As long as one of these boats is out there somewhere with 16 M51 missiles, France has guaranteed second strike capability. That's the whole point of sea-based deterrence, and France has mastered it. China's submarine force used to be a joke among Western navies, not anymore. The Type 094 Jin class changed the game by giving China a credible sea-based nuclear deterrent for the first time. These submarines started out carrying JL-2 missiles with a range around 7,200 kilometers, which meant they could threaten regional targets from waters close to China. But recent intelligence suggests they're being equipped with JL-3 missiles that can reach over 10,000 kilometers. That range means the continental United States is suddenly in play from launch positions in the South China Sea. Here's the thing about the Jin class. It's not as quiet as American or Russian boomers. Western intelligence agencies know this, and they consider tracking these submarines a high priority. But here's what matters. Even a noisy submarine carrying intercontinental ballistic missiles is a massive strategic problem. You can't ignore it. You have to commit resources to finding and tracking it, which means you're not doing something else. China operates these submarines in what they call bastion zones, similar to Russian doctrine. They'll patrol in waters close to home where Chinese naval and air forces can provide protection from American and allied anti-submarine warfare assets. Often, these submarines are escorted by destroyers specifically to keep enemy submarines away. It's not exactly the independent deterrent patrol that American Ohio-class boats conduct, but it gets the job done. The Type 094 represents China's entry into the big leagues of naval power. There are only a handful of countries that operate ballistic missile submarines, and now China is one of them. The program is expanding too. China wants to maintain a constant at-sea deterrent, which means having enough submarines that at least one is always on patrol while others are in port for maintenance or crew training. That's a huge step up from their previous capabilities. These submarines are a stepping stone. Intelligence reports talk about a Type 096 class coming in the next decade that will be quieter, bigger, and more capable. The Jin class proved China could build and operate strategic submarines. Whatever comes next is probably going to be a lot more sophisticated, and that's what keeps American and Allied naval planners up at night. Japan built one of the world's most advanced conventional submarines, and Western navies took notice. The Soryu class uses air-independent propulsion in the early boats, which allows them to stay submerged for weeks without snorkeling. Later variants switched to lithium-ion batteries, which provide even more underwater endurance and can be recharged faster when the submarine does surface or snorkel. These submarines are incredibly quiet. At low speeds on battery power, they're almost undetectable. The acoustic signature is comparable to nuclear submarines in many situations, which is remarkable for a diesel-electric design. The crew of 65 operates with extensive automation support, which reduces the workload and the chances of making noise-discipline mistakes. Japan's entire submarine doctrine is built around defending the home islands and dominating the choke points in the first island chain. The Soryu class is perfect for this mission. They can sit quietly in straits or near important sea lanes, waiting for targets to come to them. In an ambush scenario, these submarines are deadly against both surface ships and submarines that don't know they're there. The magnetic signature on these boats is extremely low, which makes them harder to detect with magnetic anomaly detectors that aircraft use for submarine hunting. Everything about the design is optimized for stealth. The Japanese have some of the most skilled submarine crews in the world, and they train constantly for anti-submarine warfare against potential adversaries in the region. Australia was originally going to base their new submarine program on the Soryu design before they switched to nuclear boats. That tells you how highly regarded these submarines are internationally. The technology and operational experience from building and operating the Soryu class fed directly into Japan's next generation Taigai class, which refined the concept even further. South Korea built something unique with the KSS-3 Dosan-an Changho class. This is a diesel-electric submarine that can launch ballistic missiles, which is extremely rare. Most countries only put ballistic missiles on nuclear submarines, but South Korea developed the capability for their conventional boats. This gives them a sea-based deterrent option without needing to develop nuclear propulsion. The submarine uses air-independent propulsion and advanced lithium-ion batteries, similar to Japanese designs. This allows extended submerged operations without needing to surface, which is critical for survivability in contested waters. The combat systems are derived from technology and experience South Korea gained from working with multiple advanced navies over the years. They took the best ideas and integrated them into an indigenous design. The noise levels are extremely low. South Korea focused heavily on acoustic quieting because they knew these submarines would need to operate in shallow, acoustically complex waters where detection is easier. Making a quiet submarine in those conditions is one of the hardest challenges in submarine design, and the KSS-3 manages it effectively. Beyond the ballistic missile capability, these submarines can launch cruise missiles and conduct land attack missions. They're integrated into South Korea's broader military strategy of being able to strike North Korean missile sites and command facilities preemptively if a conflict starts. The submarine represents a survivable strike platform that's much harder to target than land-based systems. Later batches of the KSS-3 are expected to incorporate improvements based on operational experience with the first boats. South Korea is refining the propulsion, upgrading sensors, and potentially expanding the missile loadout. This represents the high end of non-nuclear submarine technology. The fact that South Korea designed and built these submarines domestically shows how far their naval industry has come in just a few decades.